Other news we're tracking for you this morning: the battle for the control of the international Pentecostal Holiness Church and its assets has turned violent on several occasions. A legal dispute over the succession of its leader, Glayton Modise, has been raging since his death in February 2016. And this has led to the formation of splinter groups between his sons, who are all fighting for leadership. Now, 5 people have died after a group of about 50 people stormed the church on Saturday morning and took the congregation hostage. Let's unpack the story now. We're joined on the line by the chairperson of the CRL, that's the Commission for the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities, Professor David Mosoma. Professor Mosoma, thanks very much for your time here on the AM report. Wow, this reads like a graphic novel, I suppose. This is a story that has, on many occasions, turned violent. In 2018, in November, a shootout also taking place at that same church. What's going on here?
Yes, the church has a history of feuds and violence. And as you have stated, it has happened. This is not the first time. And on many occasions, people have lost their life as a result. And of course, we as a CRL have convened several meetings to try to reconcile the factions. But in all the instances, one of the faction leaders did not come. But we think maybe that the time is right now for us to be able to call them again, because these are spiritual matters which have to be solved spiritually by using the very holy book which founded the church to be the basis to bring together those who are fighting or who are in conflict. Because we don't believe that the church should be turned into a war zone, as we have seen, with so many rifles, so many shootings, and it just does not augur well with the image and integrity of the church.
The battle over the leadership of this church, is it a spiritual issue, or do you think it's a money issue?
Well, it's a spiritual issue because it emanates from the church. It's a spiritual, it shows spiritual bankruptcy. When there is spiritual shallowness or lack of it, then you gravitate into believing that issues of money and power take preeminence over the matters of the heart and the matters of the soul. And this is the problem which we have today. If these people believe in the scripture as Jesus dictated, they would have found a way above the differences in terms of who is in power and the resources they have to find in their good hearts how best to reconcile, even to approach bodies that will reconcile the 3 factions. As I indicated, we have tried last year. It's just that now we got overcome by the COVID-19 to have another bite in terms of bringing the 3 factions, because in all instances when we met only 2 factions. 1 faction was not available, which meant that it would not have been possible to reach an agreement or some kind of understanding about the nature of the problem. When money and power rule in the church, this is what you have.
Yeah. So for our viewers who don't know the details of the story, it's around the leadership over the church and who would take over from Glayton Modise. Who are those who are liable, who are sort of available and who can take over legitimately versus those who cannot?
The issue here has to do also with the Constitution.
Yeah.
When you have churches that are owned by personalities without the Constitution, the succession becomes difficult because there is no democratic system that governs who becomes the leader and how does one become a leader. Is it by birth? Is it by qualities of leadership? Is it by deepened spiritual understanding? What are those? Is it by age? What? So the Constitution should clearly delineate all of this. If the Constitution existed, you would not have feuds. But where there is no Constitution, then you are subject to this thing. In fact, we are making a call to all religious institutions, those who do not have the Constitution, to make sure that there are constitutions, because constitutions are easy to be able to determine who becomes the next leader in line. Or they use either democratic principle by way of voting, whatever the case may be, but that it's a principle. There could be a contestation about how the voting or the ballots were counted. That is a different story. But at least you have a principle that guides how the church leadership is determined.
So, I mean, Glayton himself, Bishop Glayton Modise, he did not have a will. And this is really at the heart of this war that's raging in his church. And these splinter groups that we've been talking about, these splinter groups are led by his three sons, Michael Sandlana, Leonard Modise, and Tshepiso Modise. And it's millions of rand at stake here. Isn't it, Prof?
I think they are. The issue of money is predominant. I mean, you can't organize buses, marksmen, to go and attack a religious institution. There must be something bigger at stake there. And that which is bigger at stake, it's nothing other than money.
Yeah.
Of course, the issue of power is very central, because where money and power go hand in hand. So if I take over this place, obviously the money and power will be for me. But this is not how the church ought to be operating, which is why we should not be blaming law enforcement agencies. It is not their place to be in the church. Why do we invite them? They come there because it ceased to be what it ought to be the church. It has become a scene of crime. Yeah. When it becomes a scene of crime, obviously they have to be there.
Yeah, that's when law enforcement is needed. You talk about this incident in 2018, a shootout taking place at the same church, and now what happened over the weekend that led to 5 people dying. Incredible turn of events at this church. We'll see how the story continues to unfold. Thanks very much for your time. Professor David Mosoma is chairperson of the CRL as we continue to track the story around the International Pentecostal Holiness Church, congregation of around 3 million people. A lot of money involved there.